Hello, here's May, and today I share 7 digital art tips while also talking about my process of drawing some Ensemble Stars characters in weather-themed outfits. While drawing these illustrations, I was experimenting with drawing faces a lot since for a longer time I had mostly drawn half upper body illustrations where I wasn't focusing as much on the face. I also was watching lots of head, face, or coloring videos while working on this project, which led to me questioning a lot of things while drawing. From this I learned some things and I'm gonna share them while going through the illustrations. First, let's start with the snow characters. Here I'll also explain the overall project idea. Other than Genshin Impact, I'm very interested in Ensemble Stars and I wanted to do a series of fanarts for it for some time. I also was thinking about designing outfits based on weather, so I decided to combine both these ideas. I then went through all the Ensemble Stars characters and determined which ones I would want to draw. For the weather, I chose 3 characters that wouldn't be in the same unit for different weathers, and the first one is snow. I kinda imagined the 3 characters could form a sub-unit based on the weather. For some songs in Ensemble Stars you also have characters from different units shuffle. Just as an idea, imagining the characters here doing a song based around weather would be cool, but the outfits I designed were more casual and basic outfits, not fancy stage outfits, which was also mainly because, as I said before, I was focused on drawing the faces mostly. Just so you know, Ensemble Stars is a idle game. It also has an anime. Now let's move on to the first character illustration, and this one is Eiichi from the unit Fine, and he was facing to the front, and every time I draw front-facing faces, I'm not sure if I should just use straight symmetrical guidelines to get everything to look right, or just try to do it using rough guidelines. You can ask yourself the question, should it be completely symmetrical? If yes, you could as well just use the symmetrical ruler, but for an illustration, what can also work is to have a completely symmetrical grid, but then draw the sides separately. Like this, the overall proportions and features should line up nicely and symmetrically, but be slightly different. Complete symmetry can also look just boring, and a bit of asymmetry looks more believable and interesting for the facial features if it's done the right way. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I wasn't sure about how to draw the faces. Here, especially the nose from the front, there were many different ways I was experimenting with drawing it. And now we go to the tip for this illustration, and this is to pay attention to the line weight. I noticed that from all my drawings for this video, the ones where I made use of different line weight the most and where it seems to work are also the illustrations I like the most. This also has to do with the colors and proportions of the face, of course, but what it was overall interesting to see, and I reveal which drawing I like most at the end, but in this one you can already see lots of different line weight. The main thing I try to keep attention to for line weight is to make the outline around the whole character and the outer lines of different parts like the hair or the outfit thicker. Also where the hairlines intersect around the face, where the neck ends at the face, and parts of the outline of the face are lines I make thicker sometimes. Thinner lines would especially be the facial features or smaller hair strands. For Eiichi's illustration, the shading gets more purple downwards, and I really like how his hair turned out. Now we move on to the next character, which was Ibarra from the unit Eden. And for this illustration, I had a tip for any illustration. I made the whole drawing small and figured out how the body would work to make sure it would make sense. So even if only a part of the body is visible, especially in illustrations like these where you focus on the face, when you also want to include hands or other parts of the body, then it makes sense to check that the whole pose would theoretically work, that the arm isn't in an impossible pose, because when someone looks at it, they might be able to tell that something looks off. For his illustration, you can see that I didn't do a complete outline of the face, just made indications for the jaw, and I like how this looks. For Eiichi, he had ear warmers, and Ibarra now has a small head. I also included the logo of the production company for the unit Eden in it, Cosmic Production, because the overall head is rather basic and looks more unique with it. I also made Ibarra's iris a lot bigger later on, and I did the same for Eiichi before. You also see that I use some gradients sometimes. I wanted to try applying lighting similar to what I saw in references for these illustrations. Now we move on to the third snow character, Kohaku from the unit Crazy Bee. What I noticed when I look back at the time-lapse of drawing him now, that his eyes were too close to each other at first, the distance was too small. The upper eyelid was also tilted downwards too much. I changed this throughout the process. His overall face was also too wide for me at first. Compared to both other characters, you will also see that the colors turn out less saturated. For the shading especially, I also didn't apply any gradients for the lighting here, which makes the whole illustration look maybe a bit more boring or just not as vibrant. And since this is a video where I recorded the whole screen, you can also see how I use my layers, and this is what my next tip is about. It's the layer order, how you can make use of it to work faster. This depends on how you like to draw though. I use a lot of layers and groups because I like it, but if you are fine with just using a few layers or even only one, that's fine too. It's good to find your own way of using layers, but in case you are a person that likes a lot of structure for drawing files, you can get inspired by how I use layers. For projects, I like to use one layer order that is the same for each illustration. I have this layer order in one file and copy it into new files. I hadn't completely figured out the layer order I would want to use in here, but after now having drawn some more, this is how I currently set the layers up. I will show on the screen what kind of folders I have, but overall I have a sketch group with other groups in it, and a lines group and a colors group for the different steps, and I make the painting layers in these groups and also add clipping masks to add shading later on. I could also do a process video where I explain this in more detail, but that's the basics for this tip. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by all the layers though, so while it saves me time, it can also add some time. It's not perfect, but it helps me overall. For drawing the scarves for the snow characters, I just use a textured brush to get the pattern. And now we move on to the second weather group, which was based around rain. The outfits here were inspired by a teardrop shape, the outfit itself as well as the full lineup of the characters. This leads me to my next tip. You might have already heard about using shapes for designing characters and adjusting their proportions. For anime style characters or more realistic ones, this tends to not work that well, since their proportions are fairly similar often. Hips and shoulder width and overall body mass may vary in muscle or fat, but you wouldn't turn the whole body into a circle shape or make the upper body double the size as the lower body. Because of this, using shape language and different silhouettes for the outfits and accessoires is what can be very helpful to have the characters stand out. I had Tsukasa's coat be yellow and long, while for Mayuri and Kanata they had shorter blue coats. I also drew some rain-themed sweaters with a cloud and raindrops on it. Kanata also has rain glasses as accessoires, and what immediately came to mind with the rain theme were rain boots for the outfit. I especially like how the colors yellow and blue look together with purple, and this was present in Tsukasa's eye colors and Mayuri's hair color. What I love about Ensemble Stars characters really are their unique hairstyles. It's the main thing that I would say you can recognize the Ensemble Stars characters from. The eyes are also slightly different, but if you just look at their shape, it can be hard to spot differences there sometimes. Now we move on to the first character for the rain theme. We have Kanata from the unit Ryusetai. For him I used lots of guidelines around his head for the face, but still the right eye looks too small to me in the final illustration. In general, something that bothered me while drawing all these illustrations was how the eyes I drew looked. They were too flat to me. For him I was not happy with the colors at all. Usually getting nice colors is not that difficult for me, but here for some reason it was. When I look back at this now, this was probably because his skin looks way too reddish to me. It's similar to how the skin looks in Ibara's illustration, but for some reason I find it clashes with the hair color, Kanata's hair and eye color here. This was probably because for Ibara's illustration I applied a gradient with colors over everything, for example the hair layer as well, while for Kanata only the skin has these colors and the hair or eyes don't have any gradients applied. So here's my tip for making your colors more interesting and look nice. If you want your illustration to look vibrant, you can apply gradient layers with saturated colors fitting to the lighting you imagine to all layers. This brings them all together a bit. What's very common is to have orangey or warm light colors and cool shadows, in general using color contrasts. For Ibarra or Aichi, you can see how I used yellow and purple as a color combination. I actually applied a soft light or burn layer over all illustrations with just one color, especially for the lineups, to make them all look more like they fit together, and because I like the colors more that way. Often when I look at other artists, I'm fascinated with how the colors they use can make them very unique and stand out. There are so many options. You can have very saturated, warm colors, lots of colors, neon colors, pastel colors, mostly monochromatic or just black and white. They all can look so cool to me, and sometimes it makes me want to try to draw in different art styles just to see what I like most for my own art and what I can get inspired from. It definitely helps with this. What I figured out till now is that I like more cool bluish purple pink colors. But for example, from last week's video for the sun character from my OCs there, he has a warm palette and I really like that as well. Then I sometimes also really like very desaturated and minimalistic palettes. Colors are just very interesting to me. Now we move on to the second rain character, which was Tsukasa from the unit Nights. Similar to Aichi, his face was to the front, but this time from below, and from below is the head angle I struggle with drawing the most. His neck was too wide at the upper part for me while sketching. In general, I would make the neck more straight, and especially since the angle here was from below, I would maybe even make it wider at the bottom. I didn't like how the first sketch looked at all, so I did what I mentioned now as a tip, which is sketching the overall face, body and whatever you're drawing for a second time. If you're not happy with it, you can use your original image as a reference, but since try to draw it completely from scratch. This helped me a lot and his face looked much better when drawing the angle again. I also looked at some references and guides how you can draw heads looking upwards, which helped. In general, if you're struggling with an illustration and you're still in the sketching phase, drawing it again can help a lot. I had a difficult time figuring out his nose shading since it was from the front. And for the colors overall, you can see that I had this rim light coming from behind and very purpley colors in general. He looks a bit like a zombie because of this though. I wanted to try making the illustration look a bit unsettling and generally have more of a sad vibe, since for rain that's what it can be connected to. Since Kanata's illustration was very happy, which had a very happy vibe to it, which makes sense for him since he loves water and would be very happy when it rains. But for this illustration I then wanted a contrast. The colors and the rim light was what I used to convey this, and also him just wearing the hood of his raincoat. Now we move on to the final illustration for this video, which was Mayoi from the unit Alkaloid. I like how Mayoi's illustration turned out. The colors of his eyes look very pretty to me, and his hair as well. The neck is just a bit too long. In general, I was questioning the face shading here and how much to include of it. You can see I shaded his cheeks a bit, which made the head look more 3D, but this takes a bit more time and you have to decide for yourself if you like it or not. What I discovered though is that for me, if the face shape overall works, I should be able to go both ways, meaning I should be able to go both ways, which means either including some shadows on the cheeks or not. What you see from all the illustrations here is how I used some shading around the eyes and noses, but in different ways. Finally, the tip for him would be to add flyaway hairs. I only did this for Mayoi, and flyaway hairs are these small lines that have no outline, which you can add at the end. This can make the hair look nicer and adds more detail, and you can go different ways with this. You could just add them at the bangs part of the hair to really put more attention towards the face, since that's where more detail is, or you could add it on the whole hairstyle, but yeah, it should just overall fit. If you already have very thin outlined hair strand, it might not work. I kind of wish I had done these flyaway hairs for more of the characters, but often it just didn't seem to fit to how I drew the hair. This probably also has to do with the shading, as you can probably see from all the illustrations. Even though I used highlight highlights and shading for all hairstyles, I applied it differently for each one, and this was because I still wasn't sure about what I liked and I just wanted to experiment. And for Mayoi, I especially liked drawing his braid. Anytime I get to draw longer hair, I find it's a lot of fun, and special hairstyles can be very interesting too. And finally, as I said for Eiichi's tip in the beginning, here's how I would rank the illustrations. You can see that Eiichi, Ibarra and Mayoi are the ones I like the most. The colors, the proportions, as well as the light weight just worked the most for me with them. Now for fun, I also rank the illustrations by how much I like the Ensemble Stars characters. I like all of the Ensemble Stars characters in some way though, some less and some more. Yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching, and goodbye.